Namaste. Welcome to my podcast. This is the second part of my conversation with Hari Kiran Vadlamani. In our last conversation, we had laid the groundwork in regards to the state of affairs of the marketplace of ideas as far as Hinduism is concerned. We touched upon the different players that are, involved in this manthan of Hinduism. Today, we take this conversation forward to the next stage. So let's get on with this. If you've missed the last podcast, I would really recommend you to listen to that because if you directly go to this podcast, you won't get the flow of ideas. So, you just have to go to my SoundCloud page and you just have to look for the podcast before this one. Or if you're very lazy, I'll leave the link for the last podcast in the description of this podcast itself. Anyways, let's get on with the discussion. Hari Kiranji, welcome to the podcast again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kushal. I must tell you, I enjoyed doing the podcast last time, and I also got good positive feedback from the podcast itself. So, as I just want to do a quick recap of the last podcast in terms of just what we discussed.
Yeah.
And then we can go to the subject matter of this podcast.
Yes.
And before that, would like to just say that the three-part series is primarily to look at understanding the problem itself, which Hindus face. That's the first part.
Yeah.
The second part is at the individual level, in terms of what the individuals can do based on their innate nature. And the third part is what Indic Academy and Indic Book Club is doing in terms of trying to bring about a change in the narrative. So that's the three-part structure. So in the first part, we discussed how there's a problem that Hindus face, both in terms of the three kinds of problems. One is the rights, which the government has been discriminating against the Hindus, and also the appeasement that they do to the minorities. Then the second part is the identity, which the academics, the media, and the NGOs, they distort our identity as well as appropriate our identity without acknowledgement. And the third part is how the religious group either persecute Hindus or proselytize Hindus. So that was the overall issues that Hindus face. And I put that in a framework, and I call it the RID framework, or Getting Rid of Hindus framework. Specifically from my point of view as an intellectual Kshatriya and as somebody, as a public intellectual who is working in this cause, I am more focused on the identity aspects because that's something which we can do. Whereas anything relating to the government or anything relating to dealing with issues that Hindus face at the social level, thanks to the persecution or proselytization, requires a different organizational capability, which organizations like RSS or VHP have. Individual public intellectuals would be a better place to focus on the identity aspects. Insofar as the identity is concerned, I would term the academics, media, and the NGOs who target the Hindu identity as the regressive left, and which brings me to the classification of Hindus in terms of various categories that I see them based on my experience of having been involved in this area. So therefore, the first category, of course, is the regressive left, who actually target the other Hindus in trying to distort my identity or appropriate my identity. So you have the aggressive Hindus who could be in the violences that you see in the Gaurakshaks or the Ravasena. I would not get into passing a value judgment on them in terms of the social causes that provoke them into violence, but there are certain sections who are violent, so we have to accept that. The second category would be the practicing Hindus. These are the large swathe of population that we have who go about their their lives as devout Hindus. Then you come to the third category, which is the occasional Hindus or the festival Hindus who have, thanks to the nuclear families and moving away, they only celebrate the festivals and are otherwise not regular practitioners of their faith. Then we have the closet Hindus, a large part of the economic right, who are have clarity about their identity, but choose to remain practicing Hindus, and they really don't fight for their identity or come out in the open or discuss. There are several of them, and I also manage a discussion group called Indic Economic Network, and I encounter a several number of Hindus who are very devout, but they do not discuss the issues facing Hindus. So I call them closet Hindus. Then the category, the intellectual Kshatriyas or the public intellectuals who are actually fighting to correct the narrative, to change the narrative into the distortions that we are facing on a regular basis. The next category would be the ambivalent Hindus, who are basically have doubts in their mind on their Hindu identity, and they have not yet made up their mind whether to fight for their Hindu cause or just they're in a state of doubt. So these Hindus I would call as ambivalent Hindus, and they move on to the next stage of having realized that, or having decided for themselves, not realized, having decided for themselves that they are not ritualistic, or they're not ritual Hindus. So they would perform, or they would call themselves as spiritual but not religious Hindus. So they would be the ones who would be doing, who would be loved with Dalai Lama and go to Buddhist chanting, and or go to yoga classes and look at the sunset, and listen to Deepak Chopra. That kind of spiritual but not religious. So they basically say we don't believe in rituals and that kind of stuff. And the next category would be the social justice warriors and the progressive, in quotes, Hindus, who, when faced with news items or faced with situations when there is a problem where Hindus are attacked, they keep quiet, and where the minorities attacked, they're the first ones to post it on the Facebook or Twitter, saying that, oh no, minorities are not threat. Those kind of. So they are, they want to appear Mahatmas, and they want to appear very, very progressive on their social media profile, that they always take up the case of minorities and overblow it, and never discuss the issues that Hindus face. So I call them the social justice warriors or progressive Hindus. So that's the landmark, or the landscape of Hindus that I classify. This is my classification, in the sense that this is how I look at. And what really happens is that the regressive left actually targets the occasional Hindus, the ambivalent Hindus, and the spiritual but not religious Hindus. So when they write pieces tarnishing the image of Hindus or the identity of Hindus, it's those Hindus that are being targeted, and they move from being occasional to ambivalent to being spiritual but not religious, and from there to progressive, and occasionally they become regressive also. So this is the issue at hand, that the academia, the NGOs, and the media are targeting these Hindus, and their idea is to convert these Hindus into non-Hindus. So that's the basic, I would say, proselytization, subtle proselytization that's happening, which basically converts not from Hindus to Christians, but Hindus into non-Hindus. And that's the problem that is to be fought at an intellectual level. So therefore, the public intellectuals and the intellectual Kshatriyas should understand that this is the issue at hand. And these things have not, these have been discussed by several eminent public intellectuals like Sri Raji Malhotra ji, David Frawley ji, Conrad Els. Several of them have already talked about it. So I've just put this in one framework called the RIT framework, and trying to explain what the problem is. So basically, if you are an intellectual Kshatriya, then you have to respond, and then you have to understand whom are you targeting, and what exactly are you trying to do. And this is slicing your customers, and segmenting your customers, and trying to cater the message based on the target customer. So if you are targeting occasional Hindus, then there's a certain kind of message. And if you are targeting the regressive left and trying to rebut them, then there is a certain standard of academic rigor, and there's a certain standard of research that has to go in rebutting them. So that's the kind of framework for any intellectual to prepare his response. And now we will come to the second stage of what I call as the Swadharma Dharma concept. The basic idea is that I have been fortunate to, and I would say I've been blessed to discover my circle of incompetence, or my core incompetence, quite early in my activist career. And I realized that I could never be a very serious intellectual. Therefore, in my resume that I sent you, which you read out in the first podcast, I call myself as a generalist and not a specialist. And I also, I feel good when I enable specialists, and when I enable people discover what their innate nature is. So that's what drives me personally. And this realization came to me when I first encountered, of course, in the Gita we talk about Swadharma, and in Vedanta we talk about vasanas and the innate nature of a person. And subsequently, of course, in 2001 or so, there was this seminal article by McKinsey, which really talked about unbundling the corporation. This was the first time when internet talk came into prominence, and there were a lot of companies, .com boom and all that. So the research done by the McKinsey consultants was that you can unbundle the corporation into three distinct parts, and each of these parts is a business by itself. So the first part is basically you're talking about products and innovation, and therefore kind of skill set required for that is one set of competencies. The second part is basically the value chain of manufacturing, which is the input of the raw material and the output of the product. And this is basically dependent on the economies of scale. So the per unit cost comes down as your scale goes up, so the efficiencies come in. And the third part is the customer side, which is the relationship side, and there the economies of scope comes in, and then how you nurture relationships with your customers. So effectively, any business, their thesis was that any business can be broken down into these three categories. So this I was taken very much by this concept, because at that time we were doing a lot of research into .com companies and opportunities there. And at the same time, I also came across Jim Collins' Good to Great, wherein he talks about how every company has three components, which is one is what they're good at, what is their capability, and second, what they're passionate about, and third, what is the economic engine that drives it. So fusing these two Jim Collins and McKinsey concepts, I came to understand that this can operate at the individual level also. This, of course, overlaying it on top of the Swadharma, which Krishna talks about in the Gita. So at the very individual level, you can actually break down people into three categories and understand how they are good at what. So some are, therefore, if you go to this slide, some are very good in thinking, so which is what is innovation. And the other is some people are very good in organizing. So you tell them to organize something, whether it's a wedding, whether it's a meeting, or anything, any project. They're right there, and they're they revel in that. And there are people who revel in, or who specialize in maintaining relationships. So that's so the same thing, same concept which works at the organization level actually works at the individual level also. And if you actually overlay the guna theory, basically, and then so the people with predominant sattva guna would be the thinkers, and the people with the majority, the rajas guna, would be the activists and the organizers. So this is what I would transposing this concept from McKinsey to an individual, and I would categorize, and when I meet people, I think of them, are they thinkers, or are they good at organizers, or are they good in nurturing relationships? Then if you understand what you're good at across these three spectrums, and then you realize what you're capable of, then of course, what are you passionate about? What excites you? And across the public intellectuals in Hinduism, and and in social media and Facebook, if you see, there are several people with different kinds of passions. And I will come and talk about a few of the individuals that I've been fortunate enough to deal with. But broadly, you can say that some people are passionate about language, some people are passionate about history, some people are on literature, scriptural studies, arts. So you can have different domains. So which is the domain which excites you, and that sort of determines what you can do for your dharma. Then what we talked about in the previous podcast also, in terms of the broad 4 career options that I would like to think of. And remember, I would like to remind you that we are talking about public intellectuals and their role in changing the narrative.
Okay, I want to come in here. So we need to clarify, I think, or we need to elaborate more on 2 points. See, when we dissect, or when we present the different kinds of Hindus, this is not any kind of a moral judgment on anyone. This is just how we look at the landscape, or how Hari Kiranji looks at the landscape. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I know some people are just too hypersensitive, and they'll be like, oh, you did not cover this type of a Hindu. Well, yeah, there are many more, but broadly speaking, this is what Hari Kiranji has come up with. So बाल की खाल उखाड़ना बंद करना. Now, the second aspect is very important about when you touched about your Swadharma. So, I mean, I can take my own example where, I mean, I've been in kind of, I play different roles. So I sometimes play a political role, I'll play a social role, I'll also play an intellectual role. But it's all about sustaining and being able to do that, at a very good level for a long period of time. And what I had a question for you, and I'm getting to it now. What I have observed is a lot of people start very enthusiastically, but they burn out. And I can only share my personal experience, that the way I have not burnt out, because I've been doing this now for a while, is I take breaks. I literally stop caring about what's happening. This is my way of dealing with things. Like I was supremely active in the 2014 elections, where I literally covered 33 wards door to door. We were just 5 of us or 6 of us, I don't remember. But then by 2015, I realized that, in terms of my political work, I'm losing energy. I just stopped bothering about it. Because for me, it's like, I look at it like a bear, who goes into hibernation. So he eats a lot, or she eats a lot, and then they know in the winters they're not going to get the food, and so they lose a lot of weight at that time. So for my political work, I'm in that kind of a political hibernation. So my question to you was, what do you think, how does one create that balance, when you explore your Swadharma, how does one maintain and sustain that particular passion, and where is that line of, where does one draw that balance, and how does one keep himself or herself focused?
Yeah, that's a very, in fact, I was going to deal with that a little later, but you asked it a very crucial point. The way I look at it is that this fight is a 1,000-year-old fight, right? To think that we are the ones who are going to come and save and there's going to be a big uprising of resurgence, in my opinion, is being a bit over ambitious. It would be disrespectful of what our ancestors have been fighting for. So the way I look at it is that this fight, you have to look at it like a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? And secondly, it's a baton passing. So it's a marathon plus a relay marathon. So you are born to pick up the baton from your ancestors, run the marathon, and pass on the baton. So if you think that this is going to be Modi is going to come and in 2020 everything is going to be set right, you got it wrong. So first and foremost, we must understand that this is a really long-term play. What the 70s changes in JNU that Indira Gandhi did, the effects we are facing in 30 years over a very, very long time, right? So it's a very long-term play. That's the first realization. Second thing, that to sustain oneself is precisely that you need to discover your Swadharma. Because what happens is, when you discover your Swadharma, you are in the zone. Basically, that's what Swadharma makes you, right? And when you are in the zone, you are content. You're fighting, but you're content. And therefore, the external actions or inactions don't disturb you so much. So the fact that Modi has not done anything for cultural Hindus, fine. I mean, we thought he would, but he's right now not focused on that. So, I mean, move on. But if you're just focused on cultivating, nurturing, fulfilling your potential, and then the tipping point will happen at some point. And when that happens, you feel good. So the first thing for us to think is that this is a long-term battle, this is a marathon, and you're passing a baton. This is the first thing. Second thing is, focus on your Swadharma, and Dharma will take care of itself. You try to nurture what you're capable of, discover what you're capable of, find out what you're passionate about, and focus on that. The moment you do that, then the external stimuli of what happened and what didn't happen, that we constantly are faced with on social media, doesn't affect you so much. You're detached, right? You only see it like how in the Matrix movie, they see that all the activities on the screen. You see that guy. So it's the same thing, or it's just like your Twitter profile or your Facebook profile is all those activities, and then you see a blip there and say, "Oh, Guha made this, tweet," or "Oh, this tweet was made by this guy." It's just a game. But all the time you are watching all this activity with a sense of detachment, but you are focused on fulfilling your Swadharma. That's the only way you can continue with your passion, can maintain your stamina, and be fulfilled.
Yeah, that's a very vital thing, because what my experience is, people burn out because they get they get disappointed or they get dejected. Aap chalu karte ho, and then you see, oh, I'm really enthusiastic and I'm gonna do this, and actually this attitude goes in everything in life. Let's say even if you're working out in a gym, initially you have a lot of energy, but then after a while it becomes redundant, it becomes monotonous, and the toughest part of any kind of activism is, whether it's intellectual activism or whether it's activism on the ground or any activity, is the redundancy. It becomes monotonous. You're doing the same thing again and again and again and again. So I can't make I can't talk about it often. Just take breaks. My advice to anyone who really cares about Hinduism is, once in a while, god damn it, take a break. Just stop thinking about it, and I think that will help people a lot. Anyways, now let's go on to the second aspect, where when in the initial part of that you had mentioned that that you'll talk about some specific people and use them as examples, and I believe specific examples are very important, because in that way we can lay the groundwork. Okay, देखो इस बंदे ने ये काम किया है और देखो ये कैसे कर रहा है, and look at the time frame that this guy
Absolutely.
has gone on and done specific things. So can you elaborate on that? Because I feel that is the most important aspect, because in any movement we need heroes, or we need idols to look up to. We can use any word that we want to, but we need someone, एक आदर्श होना चाहिए कि देखो इस बंदे के जैसे मुझे करना, और देखो ये कितने समय से कर रहा है. So can you give us a few names?
Yes. I'll just so like I said, that we are talking about the four career options, and I just want to highlight one point on temperament also, because what happens is that apart from your capability and your passion, your temperament also determines the how long you fight and how you fight. And some people are sensitive, and some people are can withstand the constant abuses that one faces. So if you're the sensitive types, then there would be a lot of debates within our Hindu intellectuals itself, and therefore then you would be better off not being dealing in the areas of protection. You would be more it's easier for you to deal in preservation or promotion, because there's less of ego in those spaces, whereas you have a lot of ego in the protection space. So it's very important to understand what's your nature, whether you're sensitive or whether you can brace yourself with to abusers. You see this all the time on social media. So now just look at this framework. So you have like an activist, for example. If you want to talk about an activist, let me just take out the names I have. See, there's this guy called Chetan Pandey. Okay, so now this guy is really focused, and is very, very focused on digitization. I mean, that's his trip in life. He wants to digitize every manuscript that's available in India, right? He's a bachelor, he's 38 years old, he lives in Singapore, and he spends money, whatever his savings are, he spends money and sends them to India. He has a couple of people, so he goes around to libraries, and he has the scanners, and he just wants to digitize. That's his trip, right? Very focused. So what is he? He is basically an activist who is working in the preservation space, right? So, and if you just go back to that framework, that slide of Swadharma and Dharma, now he's an organizer, right? And he's focused on scriptures, and he's an activist, right? He since he's by the way, he's very sensitive, because a lot of feedback about the government, and he's is cribbing, but basically he's in this preservation space. Likewise, you have in the artist space, for example, there's a friend of mine I just recently met. He works in New York in Goldman Sachs, and he's an artist who is focused on creating visual, using CAD/CAM and using modern software, visuals on Mahabharata. So he's already had released 3 books. His name is Somdeep Datta. So he's a thinker. He's working on the scriptures, but he's an artist, right? And he's working in the area of promoting these books, right, into to the younger generation. Likewise, if you look at somebody like Anurag Saxena, whom you had done with recently a podcast.
Anurag is a brilliant guy.
Now he's an activist. Yeah, he's an activist, and his trip in life is to bring back all the stolen idols in the world. That's it. So what does he do when he gets up in the morning? That's all he thinks of, and that's all he does. He's very specialized, very focused. So if you think he's an organizer, and he's again focused on history, and he's an activist, and in terms of preservation of our heritage, he's very much there. Look at, for example, people like Nupur or Shafali, Alok Bhatt, Yogini. These people are our border security forces. Like I tease them and say that you are my BSF. So I go to sleep in the night knowing that you'll be there to protect the borders against the left liberals' attacks. So and they have the stamina. So you go back to the temperament. They're very detached. So if you look at the kind of abuses that these people face every day in and day out, but they have developed a sense of detachment, and they're there. So they're in the protection game. They're on social media, and what they're doing effectively is whenever their lies are propounded, then they correct them. So they're correcting the narrative, they're protecting, and they're activist, social media activists. On the other hand, look at True Indology, or look at Ratnakar from Hyderabad. He's a friend of mine. Or look at Sanjeev Sanyal. Now, their trip in life is their nuttiness quotient is focused on history, right? I mean, if you look at True Indology and Ratnakar's timelines, the kind of in-depth study they do, it's something which is very inspiring. And I know that both of them have software careers, so they're like otherwise employed. It's not their full-time job, but the way Ratnakar is more on the positive side, not on the corrective side. So he's focused on history. He's passionate about history, but he blogs in depth. So there's a political leader whose birth anniversary is there, whose death anniversary is there. You can be sure that there would be a blog from Ratnakar. And on the other hand, True Indology is on the corrective space. So whenever there is something that is being tried to portrayed, he is there to correct it. So because he the kind of knowledge that he has on his fingertips is something amazing. You already know about Sanjeev. Sanjeev is a good friend from Singapore. He was like an investment banker, right? And he wrote these books on history and geography, and he was actually, he took a break and went around and discovered himself, and then discovered his country, and made us discover this country through his wonderful writing, right? So you look at Chandrahasala. If you know him, you met him in Mumbai. Now he's a thinker, and his thing is in science. He's into Vedic mathematics. His book is coming, and he's going to speak now at the next conference. So he's in the preservation space. He has a sensitive temperament. His temperament doesn't really matter, because he's a thinker, and his output is what matters. And his quality is almost at the academic stage. So I would guess that at some point he would want to do a PhD himself. You also, like I said, if you look at the categorization between thinkers, organizers, and nurturing relationships, in organizers you have again several people, like my friend in Delhi, Vipul Kochar. He loves putting together, and he frequently conducts several meetings there. Then you have Pramod from Coimbatore, who organizes meetings. Then you have Yogini, who does that in Bombay. Kiran Kumar Kiran Kumar. I don't know whether you follow him. He is from Bangalore, and he's a brilliant organizer.
I do. He's kind of
So you
he's an interesting guy.
Very, 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 very interesting. Down to earth, and he's the kind of guy who will be there. Like he will distribute on Diwali crackers in the slum areas for the kids. So he's like really down to earth and on the ground level. So again, if you look at activists, there are quite a few of activists that are there. Like Omendru Ratno, who is you might be knowing. He's based in Jaipur, and he does a lot of work for Pakistani Hindus who migrate into Rajasthan. So he runs a NGO and he does a lot of work there. Friend of mine from Chennai, his name is J.K. Jawar. He does a very interesting thing. He has broken Chennai into some 10 zones, and in each zone, all the temples he has marked, and he ensures that in every zone, every month, there's one ceremony or homam is done, and he engages all the local people so that they feel involved. That's the beauty. So he engages the Dalits that are there, the backward class, everybody. He involves them and he makes them do the homams, so they're completely involved in that. So that's a very ground level activist work that is there. Then of course about Sai Deepak and the kind of pioneering work that he's doing in the legal space. You have a similar person in Bangalore called Kiran Vadlamani. I don't know whether you follow him, but he does again a lot of work on temple-related issues. He's an activist.
Oh, I did not know about this guy, so it's good you mentioned this name. I'll kind of follow up on him now.
Yeah, he's also in the verge of. He's done substantial work in this temple space, like Sai Deepak, but he's based in Bangalore. Look at Anuradha Goyal. I mean, she has written 600 reviews. So her nuttiness quotient is reading books and travel. And what kind of travel? She will travel to every heritage place around India and across the world, and she writes, right? And she writes. So what she's doing she's in the area of promoting, right? And she's a thinker, and she's an author. It's a wonderful. You must read here. Go to her blog and read her.
I actually have checked a few of her blogs out. She's amazing, actually. I kind of envy her how much traveling she gets to do.
Yeah, she lives in Goa, and she's written a business book also, and that's the thing that in the end we will talk about that ikigai diagram that I've sent you, of how each of us are pursuing our respective professional careers, but have made a second career of serving our dharma, right? And in the process discovering a Swadharma. So that's the beauty. So you're discovering what you're capable of, discovering your passion, right? And then determine your temperament, then determine what kind of career you want to do, whether you want to be an activist or an author or academic or an artist. And then look at whether you want to work in the preservation space, protection space, promotion space, and whether it's in rights, identity, or the demographics. See, for example, Omendru works in the demographic space. Effectively, when he's protecting Hindus who are fleeing from Pakistan, he's basically looking at the demographic space. Look at my friend Abhinav. I mean, he loves reading and writing reviews, and is a great guy. I mean, he does a lot of indie chats for us. Jaydeep Prabhu. I mean, he reads. He's been challenged by Swarajya to read and write 50 books in a year. That's almost like one book a week, and he's doing that. He's actually doing that. So he's completely obsessed with reading. My young friend Aniket, he likes to read. Not only that, he set up a portal called Pleasant Reads. So he's actually actively promoting authors. So you see, there is a very beautiful flavor. For example, Dimple Call, her poetry. I mean, she's an artist, right? She's an activist also, but she's an author, and her poetry is so mellifluous. I mean, and you have Arun from Singapore, and he writes micro poetry invariably every other day on Twitter, but he writes it in Telugu. You have Jitu. He's a cameraman, and so he's very focused on trying to work on making movies. Then there's Manish from Birmingham, so he makes documentaries. You have Suhas Mahesh, who is a Sanskrit he's obsessed with that. And so when you see his writings in Swarajya and you look at the way he understands the language and promotes the language. Then my friend in US, Vishal Agrawal, his obsession is to collect any and every book published on Hinduism in the world. That's it. That's his trip. And he's a walking, talking encyclopedia. So therefore, if I ask him, if somebody sends an email, bang, within 5 minutes, you will get a response from him saying that this is the book, this is the chapter, this is what will happen. It's an amazing person. I mean, you must meet him, and probably you should do a podcast with him, because I haven't met any individual, and he's not an academic, right? He works in corporate America. So he's not an academic. So he is doing this on the side. And he has the biggest, probably the biggest library on Hinduism in the world. I can say that.
I have to get him on my podcast then.
You must. Then Jijit Ravi from Bangalore. I mean, he's portal on called Ancient Voice, and you must look him up. So he looks at the past scriptures and his study of that. So you see the flavor. Then Vijayalakshmi Vijay Kumar from Bangalore, she does a temple festival every year. So she's an activist, and she has revived the dance performances in temples. So every year she does a temple festival in Bangalore, and that's how she's trying to preserve and promote our culture. And so you see there's several examples. Mayuresh Didolkar, I mean, he's an avid reader. He reads several books every year. Plus, he is also now writing so prolifically. I mean, his highly successful career in writing now is so you can see that flavor. Sai Swarupa, again, she's written to my books based on mythology, and she's an MBA. She's working in the UK, but this is her second career, writing books with an angle of taking the mythological characters. Ashish Dar, for example, I mean, you look at him and look at how he's an artist, right? So he's a thinker, he's an artist, and he's in the area of protection because the kind of lyrics he writes. So obviously, he's protecting us from the left libbies. So you see the sheer fascination of different individuals. I mean, and their journey and the narrative arc that they take. They have their careers, but they have a passion. They're either thinkers or they're organizers or they're good in relationships, and then they pursue this on the side, and they're very good at it. Now the thing is that if you now go to that Ikigai diagram, which is an extra Venn diagram, extra circle from what Jim Collins has done, is that what the world needs. So what I'm good at, right? What I love, which is what's my passion. Then what can I be paid for, which is the profession, and what the world needs. So this is a very interesting additional circle to the Venn diagram. So here, if you replace what Dharma needs, right? Dharma needs to be preserved, protected, promoted. Dharma is being affected in terms of its rights, in terms of its identity, in terms of its demographics. So that's the space, that's the circle there. That's what needs to be done. Now, what you love, it could be history, it could be science, it could be it could be language, it could be these stories. So there are multiple things that you could be passionate about. Now, most of the public intellectuals, and what you're good at is, in terms of whether you're a thinker or organizer or good in relationships. Most of the public intellectuals on social media that you see, the profile is that they have chosen a path of what I call they're victims of the engineerification of India, And so therefore most of them are chosen career paths of becoming engineers, chartered accountants, or doctors, and have not gone into humanities. So this is a big trend from the 70s or 80s. So the most of the generation, Gen X and millennial generation, are not in the humanities space. What has happened is that most of them have this innate nature, have their Swadharma, have their passion, and thanks to social media, they have now discovering that they want to give back to the dharma, and they're discovering this aspect, right? And the typical profile is you have a 35-year-old successful corporate person, corporate intellectual, but who is on the side pursuing his passion. And that's what you're seeing as the emergence of what Sagarika calls as internet Hindus, or whatever their mocking names that they ascribe to us. But the large part of the public intellectuals are these intellectuals who are inherently good in humanities but chose a non-humanities career, who are now 35 plus, are wanting to discover their swadharma, wanting to serve their dharma, and wanting to uh, uh, fulfill their passion. So that is the broad framework.
You've raised a very important point in this where, you mentioned how people who are successful or have a stable life are now getting into this. And I want to add to this. I'll use a very funny example or weird example. I don't know how many people have seen the movie China Gate. In China Gate, there was a very interesting scene where there was this honest professor. He goes out and he tries to fight the villain in the movie. I think the villain's name was Jagira. So, the professor goes out and Jagira kills him. And then Jagira says, बहादुरी तो तुम ले आए, कमीनापन कहाँ से लाओगे? So I think it is very important to be a kamina. When you are in the Kurukshetra, जब आप लड़ रहे हैं और and when I say kamina, I don't mean in a bad way. I mean you have to be street smart. You have to be a hustler. And this is my view that make money. When you make money, the probabilities of the left hurting you, and believe me, the left is vicious. They are vicious. They'll go after you. They'll try to go after your job. I mean, the biggest reason I have been secured in my life is that they can't go after me. I don't have a job. I don't care. तुम मुझे क्या बंद करोगे? किसके बारे में कंप्लेंट करोगे मेरी जाके? No, I'm a self-employed person, and it's very important to be financially stable in this war. It's a battle of ideas, and the opposing side is willing to stoop to a level which is actually kind of sad. I mean, I remember when they went after Rahul Raj, Bhaksala. The way they went after him, they the guy lost his job, and that was a lesson. I think it's a lesson for all of you. Anybody who listens to this podcast and he wants or she wants to do something for dharma, god damn it, make sure you're making money. Please make money. Once you have money, people say पैसा तो हाथों का मैल है. जो भी ये गधा बोलता है पैसा हाथों का मैल है, उसको बोलो वो सारा मैल अपने आप निकाल दे और मुझे दे दे. मैं उसका सारा मैल लेने को तैयार हूं, मैं उसका सारा पैसा लेने को तैयार हूं, क्योंकि मैं जानता हूं पैसे से ही आधी चीजें जीती जाती हैं. पैसा बहुत जरूरी है. And unfortunately, I don't know about you, Hari Kiran ji, but there is this for humility. It bothers me. नहीं यार, मैं नहीं जानता, हमें हम्बल होना चाहिए. हम्बल होके क्या मिला हमको? मुझे आज तक नहीं समझ पड़ता क्या मिला है. Humility has gotten us what? It has gotten us insults. It has gotten us labels. I'm not saying to be cocky, but I definitely don't believe in for humility anymore. And anybody who listens to this, please make sure you make money. You have your things set, and then you go after them. And then you go after them like there is no tomorrow. I mean, that's my way of thinking. I don't know what you think, but please comment what you feel about what I've said.
No, I agree. Artha is important. Without artha, you cannot pursue anything else. So, I mean, that's the first and foremost thing. And Yeah, so it's again, that's why this if you go back to the chart, I did talk about temperament, and I could have added a few more features there, including humility. But basically, when you are sensitive, then that issue comes. There is no doubt that there's a predominant number of people on the right who are sensitive to criticism and sensitive, so that, and they're very humble. That's well, I mean, I don't want to be sounding like a supremacist, but that's the dharmic way. So, but to counter that, don't come back to me as a kshatriya and then say, come back to me as, give me Arjuna spiel. But yes, there is a need for aggression, and that's why if you see how Rajiv Malhotra's coined, I mean, uses the word intellectual kshatriya, and so there is a need for aggression. There's no doubt about that. I don't deny, but it's a very personal thing, don't you think? I mean, like I haven't tweeted your our podcast yet because I like I said, I mean, that's I don't, I don't want to say anything else, but yes,
Yeah,
you're
but
right.
it doesn't
We
make,
need.
see, honestly, please don't get me wrong. I have a lot of respect for you, but it doesn't get us anywhere. I mean, I'll give you my example. I have done tons of charity in my life. I'm someone who's a ground worker and who reads 40 books a year. But, and in my beginning, when I used to work, or when I used to go to slums and feed meals and then get into the slum and try and solve their problems, I would not put photos of it because I would feel very embarrassed. बट देन somebody sat down with me. He's like, अरे यार तू ये काम कर रहा है, तू जब तक इस काम के बारे में लोगों को बताएगा नहीं तो दूसरे इंस्पायर कैसे होंगे, या तू अपने आइडिया शेयर नहीं करेगा तो लोगों को मालूम कैसे पड़ेगा. So I mean, if you don't retweet your podcast, I mean, it doesn't get, your voice is not going to be heard, Hari Kiran ji. So this time you're going to retweet the second part.
Yes, I will. I will. Surely I will. But anyway, I mean, this is really a personal thing. In fact, there was a debate recently on on a particular aspect in one of the mail groups, and then I realized that insight. That's why if you see that the chart again, I put protect in a red category, right? And then I say intense debate with other Hindu intellectuals. What happens is that because, like you said, we discussed this in the last podcast also, that we have very beauty of Hinduism is a diversity of thought. But in a normal situation, diversity of this is good. But when you're being attacked, at some point in time, you need to shed your differences on the thought and the subtle nuances of this and that and all that. And we can park them aside, but we need to come to some kind of a unity in thought as to how to respond, right? So therefore, but you can't do that right now. We are not geared for that situation. So therefore, half the energy is sapped in trying to bring about this kind of unity in or uniformity in thought. So that's where in the space of protection, we would be there would be a time lag between our opponents and us in the kind of responses, and you can see that. You can see the lone wolf battles that David G, Conrad, Rajiv G, all of them, they're all actually lone warriors. Bhal Gangadhar Ji, they're all fighting. It's only now that there is a sort of confluence of factors that has come in, whether it's social media, whether it is the lost decade of UPA, multiple factors that and the millennials and the Gen X of the who are now 40 plus and who want to do something back. So there's several factors that come together, and then the work done by all of them is now gaining traction, gaining momentum, that now you can see the different streams of these thought coming together into a river. So that's the kind of thing that's happening right now, but it's going to take time. So it'll still take some time before we have that kind of a response.
Yeah, so I was saying I'm actually quite positive, and I'm actually quite sure that something good is going to come out of it, because social media has really changed the game, or the rules of the game in that sense. So yeah, in a way, I'm actually quite hopeful about the future. But yeah, again, I want to clarify something. When we may mean intensity and aggression, we don't mean violence. So so anybody who gets any other idea about it, when you mean intensity, you mean intensity with mutual respect. You go, it's like, you go into the boxing ring, you want to knock the living daylights out of the other guy in boxing. Or when you go on a badminton court or a tennis court, you want to win, but you want to play fairly, you want to respect your opponent. You're going to lose sometimes, you're going to win sometimes. So that's the attitude you got to have in life. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up. We've touched the hour mark, and we have a lot to do, chat again in our third part. For the listeners, a lot of time Hari Kiran ji has mentioned about a chart. So I'm going to put, obviously, like the last time, the chart is going to be the display picture on the YouTube slide, and obviously it will be the image of the SoundCloud display picture. So you guys can just click on the image and you can look at the chart. Or you guys, if you're listening on SoundCloud, you can just go on YouTube or SoundCloud, just go on the display picture and you'll see the chart. And anybody who does not get the chart, probably just contact me on Twitter. I leave my handle on the on the description of every podcast, and or we can send you the chart via email or something. So Hari Kiran ji, thanks a lot, and I'm looking forward to part 3 now.
Thank you, Kushal.
All
Good
right,
night.
take care.
Bye.